Testing 1 2 1 2. Testing testing 1 2 1 2.
Recording in progress.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to City Hall. Good to see everyone here. I know that we have a heavy agenda on public safety today, but I did want to take a moment to say I'm glad that everyone is okay for the accident outside City Hall. And thank you for the response that you all have over there right now, making sure everyone is taken care of. All right, Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mayor Williams,
I'm here.
Mayor Pro Tem Middleton,
I'm here.
Councilmember Baker,
Here.
Councilmember Caballero,
Here.
Councilmember Cook has been granted an excused absence, Councilmember Freeman,
Present.
Councilmember Rist.
Here.
Thank you.
All right, colleagues, are there any announcements? Councilmember Baker? Javier? Freeman? Councilmember Freeman, do you have any comments? Announcements, any announcements or anything?
I'm sorry. Oh.
Okay. Councilmember Rist? Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No announcements. I just want to associate myself with your comments and expressing gratefulness that our officer and residents and civilians were not seriously injured in the accident that occurred outside. Very grateful. Thank you, sir.
That's good. All right. Give me one moment here. She's getting on the internet. I went offline. I'm not sure what's going on. Yeah. Yeah. There we go. I'm back. Verizon, man. I'll now recognize any priority items by our manager.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor Williams, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem Middleton, and members of the Durham City Council. I do have a couple of priority items for your consideration today. Agenda item number 16, which is the 2023 fourth quarter crime report, includes a presentation, and we're estimating approximately 20 minutes to receive that presentation. Agenda item number 24, which is a Shotspotter evaluation presentation by the Wilson Center. That presentation has been added to your agenda packet, and we also are anticipating approximately 20 minutes for that presentation. Thank you. That is all I have for you today.
Thank you, Madam Attorney. Yeah, you know what, we'll go ahead and I'll entertain a motion for the manager's priority items.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and properly seconded. All in favor, please show by raising your hand. All right, thank you. All right, Madam Attorney.
Thank you, Mayor Williams. Good to see you all today. I do not have any priority items, but if I may have a point of personal privilege.
May.
Awesome. I would like to introduce the newest attorney who has joined the City Attorney's Office, Sarah Laws. If you would come, introduce yourself to the council.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, members of council. I'm Sarah Laws. I'm joining the City Attorney's Office from the North Carolina Justice Center. I'm a graduate of Duke Law, so I'm very excited to be joining the city and to be working with such a fantastic City Attorney's Office.
Thanks, Sarah.
Madam Attorney, I would like to take a moment and just thank you for your intentionality on how not only skillful but diverse your office is. It's a beautiful thing to see.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We appreciate that.
All right, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The city clerk's office has no priority items.
All right, thank you. All right, second order of business, I will read our consent agenda. Item 1, Durham Affordable Housing Implementation Committee appointment. Item 2, Human Relations Commission appointment. Item 3, January 2024 bid report. Item 4, interlocal agreement for the distribution of sales tax between the City of Durham and the Durham County. Item 5, amendment number 1 for Justice Matters Incorporated, contract number 18355 for the Immigration Legal Defense Pilot Project. Number 6, agreement to fund El Centro Hispania COVID Recovery Initiative operated by El Centro Hispania Incorporated using City of Durham grant funds. Number 7, American Rescue Plan Act project, Road to Wealth Building project. Number 8, I'm going to pour number 7 myself. Number 8, amendment to contract 18394 between the City of Durham and Durham County for the provision of the housing opportunities for persons with AIDS, HAPWA, housing assistance, and related supportive services. Item 9, fiscal year 24 debt service fund and water and sewer funds budget ordinance amendments. Number 10, resolution authorizing the virtual city auction. Number 11, cooperative group purchase contract, Knuckle Boom Trucks. Number 12, structural maintenance improvements for parking facilities, design agreement with Kimberly Horn and Associates. Number 13, service contract with Triangle Stump Removal Service LLC for right-of-way stump removal. 14, purchase contract with Bars Recreation LLC for the playground and surface replacement project at Whippoorwill Park. 15, purchase contract with Game Time for the playground and surface replacement project at CR Wood Park. 16, 2023 fourth quarter crime report, 2023 fourth quarter crime report. That will be a presentation, all right. Number 17, contract for Spot Shot Response Services Agreement.
Pull that one.
Number 18, purchase agreement with Nearmap USA Incorporated for Nearmap vertical imagery. Number 19, contract with NWN Corporation for City Network Core Switch Upgrade. Number 20, transit grant project ordinance amendments. 21, fiscal year 2023-2024 services agreement with Go Triangle for the Regional Information Center. Our presentations 22, fiscal year 2023-2024, second quarter financial report, and Haw River Presentation, and 24, Shotspotter evaluation presentation by the Wilson Center, and public hearings to be heard on Monday, 25, consolidation, annexation, Olive Branch Reserve North. 26, zoning map change, Old West Farms, Durham. 27, zoning map change, R Green Hill. Right, and we have some citizens matters here. Josh Ravitch, Amy Rosenthal, Catherine Wolf, Phoebe Wolf, Sarah Maxwell, Khalid Harley, and Julian Mack. And then 35, we have a closed session to discuss negotiation of contract terms for a proposed contract regarding real property. All right, that is our consent agenda. Items we have pulled.
7 and 17 have been pulled.
Okay. All right, so that's our consent agenda with pulled items 7 and 17. We will move to our citizens matters first. The names that I called, I'll call again. Want to see if they're in the building. Josh Ravitch, Amy Rosenthal, Catherine Wolf, Phoebe Wolf, Sarah Maxwell, Khalid Harley, and Julian Mack. Madam Clerk, do you see any of them online?
Of them are online.
Okay, thank you very much.
So you have 3 people here.
Okay, I didn't see those, I'm sorry.
Who's signed here on a citizen matter and not an item that you have on the agenda. So those would be additional people if you permit them to speak, if they're here.
Madam Clerk, can you see if we have Jeremy Berggren or DeWarren Langley online? No?
Or Julian Mack.
Or Julian Mack? Okay, Jeremy is there. Jeremy, can you hear me?
Yes, Mayor Williams, can you hear me?
Yes, if you will, please speak up closer into the mic, and you have 3 minutes.
All right, thank you, Mayor Williams and City Council members. My name is Jeremy Berger. My address is on file. I live in the South Side. Just wanted to share this week, following the ceasefire resolution. I'm a former member, of Iraq Veterans Against the War. I didn't really have any, theoretical problems with the ceasefire, but I wanted to share with y'all on the City Council, because you have a role in some of the things mentioned. I really had to sit and agree with everything Councilmember Freeman said, as really a person in Durham with disabilities, a poor person, someone who needs social services in veteran-specific housing. The victory that people claim in 2018 about separating the security measures, really what I experienced as someone on EBT was that Durham became more militarized in social services building to get in and out of that building. And so I had this experience of being an anti-war veteran in a community that wasn't really necessarily capturing the militarization happening on the streets in Durham. And so I'm concerned about moving forward for exactly the reasons Councilmember Freeman stated. All the killings in Durham, and what's the time we're going to spend on the ceasefire in our own city. Several months ago, I got back involved with Veterans for Peace to bring this issue up, bring some issues in the school system up, and even since I'm figuring out how to bring it up. And these are our comrades who have really educated me on a lot, but there's a vast difference between people in Durham that, like me, I've experienced gun violence. I held someone dying in my hands, you know what I'm saying? And so that was really hitting me. I appreciate Council Member Freeman, the space of silence you gave and the words you gave, because there's really blood on everybody's hands in Durham. And I hope that moving forward, y'all can lead, and really folks who are showing up for the ceasefire can start incorporating themselves or have some type of relational accountability to people on the ground who are experiencing war right at home, through poverty and through gun violence, and other forms of domestic violence. I thank y'all for the time, and I just want to share those thoughts. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for those comments. Thank you. Next, I have Durham Langley. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
I can. Welcome. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mayor Williams, Mayor Pro Tem Middleton, members of the City Council. I come this afternoon to ask for a drop. You all had your budget retreat, and I heard a lot about drops in the bucket. And I wanted to talk a little bit about the Charles Hamilton Houston Foundation and our commitment to fostering the academic leadership and professional development of boys and young men of color in our community. We often hear statistics about boys and young men of color. What I'm calling on for you all to do today is to make them a policy and budgetary priority. The foundation mission is to provide a comprehensive continuum of strategy-centered, skill-based, and career-focused programs, services, and mentorship. We have been doing this since 2016, transcending theoretical knowledge into practical strategies to help them understand and prepare for not only academic excellence, but to succeed in the competitive workforce. Most notably, our flagship Young Men of Excellence program has yielded remarkable results working with boys in middle and high school. 100% of our scholars attribute their empowerment to the program, citing increased confidence, knowledge, and support critical for acquiring education skills and a winning attitude for college and career success. Our scholars consistently scored at or above grade level on intergrade tests, demonstrating efficiency of our approach. Graduating scholars have achieved outstanding milestones, with 100% of them gaining acceptance into college and securing scholarships, while also transitioning to our career pathway program, which boasts a 98% success rate, with fellows securing career-oriented full-time employment with an average annual income of $69,071 a year. Remarkably, 100% of our fellows who applied to graduate school were admitted, underscoring the caliber of our programs. Your investment in the Charles Hamilton Houston Foundation will be an investment in the boys and young men of color in our community that we often hear should be a policy and budgetary priority. Not only does this work drive positive change in their lives for them, but it also contributes to the long-term prosperity and viability of our community. Thank you all so very much, and I look forward to meeting and speaking with each of you in order to secure some support in the upcoming budget.
Thank you, Mr. Langley, for your comments. I also, do we have anyone else come online with that list? Oh, no, that's everyone, right? Okay. I also wanted to state that I have, so Mr. Johnston, I have you for item 17. And Abdul Nasser, I have you also for item number 17. I'm going to call you all when we get to that item in the agenda, which won't be long. And we'll just go through. And also anyone else who signed up, of course, I'll call you at that agenda item. All right.
Number 7.
Yeah, number 7. All right. So I just had a question for number 7. Just considering the way ARPA, who's my resource person for?
Good afternoon, Mayor Williams, members of City Council. I'm Bertha Wimbush, Deputy City Manager for Operations.
Good afternoon. Thank you. I just conceptually, I really look forward to this. I think it's a need at the ground level in our community. But I know it's also really ambitious, and I want to just state publicly if there is any support that's needed to make sure this goes to fruition. Like, where are they in the process? Have they already conceptualized it? Do they need more support connecting with other organizations, or are they all lined up, or are they trying to get started with it?
So the sessions for the work are spread over 4 sessions, so it's over a time period, and they have a minimum number, maximum number of participants in the program. Mr. Larry Hester is here with us today if you want to ask him additional questions.
I think I can, considering I was the only one that pulled it, what I'll do is I'll reach out to you, Mr. Hester, and just speak with you directly. But more so, it's just seeing where you are in the process, and if you, if I can be of assistance of connecting with other resources to help bring it forth. That's what I've been doing with a lot of the other projects, so just offering that here as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Workforce development is important. All right, what's next, 17? No, Haw River. Yeah. All right, next item for us to discuss is Haw River, which is a presentation. I will be going a little out of order here based on what's on the agenda, but I'm going to address it.
And if I request this item, so I can just, as a bit of background. So obviously, water quality is so critical in our community. We were reached out to by some colleagues from Haw River Assembly to receive a presentation about research they've been doing in the waterways to identify what kind of litter we find. So much of our the challenge in water quality is runoff into our streams, and so they've done a research project identifying what kind of litter is running off in our streams and how what we can do to address that and what that means in terms of policy. So you all the experts, I'll let you take it away, but thanks for coming and sharing your research with us.
Yeah, thank you so much.
So welcome, and yeah, that mic, you will have to speak pretty much into it, not that uncomfortably, but just make sure you're speaking a little close to it so we can hear you. Thank you.
Sounds good. Thank you all so much for having us here today. It's a privilege to speak to you all about this very important issue. My name is Madison Haley, and I work on plastic pollution issues for a local nonprofit called the Haw River Assembly. Emily Sutton, the Haw River Keeper, who leads our advocacy and pollution work, is here virtually, or at least will be soon, and will be able to help me answer any questions at the end. To first introduce our organization, we are a 501c3 nonprofit citizens group founded in 1982 to restore and protect the Haw River and Jordan Lake, and to build a community that shares this vision. While today I'm going to focus on our plastic pollution work, we also advocate against things like industrial contaminants like PFAS and 1,4-dioxane, and have a robust water quality monitoring program, in addition to running an environmental education program and many, many other things. The area that we advocate for is the entire Haw River watershed, which includes not just the Haw River itself, but Jordan Lake and every little stream, creek, and creek that flows into the river. Watersheds are natural boundaries defined by where the water flows. So here in Durham, we're actually in 2 distinct watersheds, the Haw watershed and the Neuse watershed. The southwest half of Durham drains to the Haw River, which we defend and protect, and the northeast half of the city drains to the Neuse River, which has a different river keeper called Sam Crop. Now, for what I came to talk to you about today, is our plastics pollution program, which includes our trash traps, which you can see on the screen here. One of our most visible environmental problems here in Durham is litter. I'm sure you all see it on the roadsides, at local parks, or in walks in the neighborhood. And next time you go for a drive or walk, I challenge you to start actively looking for it. It's become so ubiquitous in our environment, that especially those small degraded pieces, that it simply just blends in. This is a problem for many reasons. First, when it rains, the stormwater carries litter into our local waterways and negatively impacts how our local residents, both human and not human, get to experience their community. Second, when litter is left in our waterways, it breaks down into chemicals and microplastics that can harm both human and ecosystem health. It breaks down into chemicals and microplastics. Third, our rivers lead to the ocean, so pollution here isn't contained here. We're sending it to other communities to deal with these problems that we're creating. So you ask, what can we do? Well, first I want to tout about our trash trap program. We've been working with municipalities and stormwater departments across the watershed, including the wonderful folks here at Durham, to install these 3-sided floating traps in local streams to collect litter that flows down them. These trash traps serve many purposes. First, it helps us facilitate regular and efficient cleanup efforts with our fantastic volunteers. Second, we collect data about this litter to help us understand the issues so that we can better address it. And third, we put these traps in public places so that the public can interact with them and hopefully take pause to think about why we need these in the first place. This slide here is a diagram about how the traps work. Essentially, as water flows downstream, it carries litter with it and is guided by buoys into our traps. These traps don't have a bottom, and the cage material has large openings to ensure that no wildlife is harmed or gets stuck. These are pretty simple structures, and many cities are even paying for them on their own. They're effective, eye-catching, and they would be a great interactive component of your stormwater education program. The map here on the right is the Haw watershed, where we have 5 traps currently installed, including here in Durham's Third Fork Creek, and then also Chapel Hill, Pittsboro, Carborough, and Greensboro. And we're currently working with the Durham Stormwater Department to get a second one installed in Northeast Creek because of how great our first one has been. Like I mentioned before, we collect litter data with big thanks to the Duke Environmental Law and Policy Clinic. In our Durham trash trap in Third Fork Creek, we've collected over 40,000 pieces of trash, the vast majority of which have been styrofoam and other types of plastic. On the right here, I've listed out our top 10 items, which again are a lot of styrofoam, plastic bottles, and funnily enough, sports equipment, so make sure you bring your basketballs inside when it rains. And while litter and plastic pollution are big systemic issues, there are short-term things that Durham can do to help. First is ensuring large contributors of litter have better systems in place. For example, upstream of our Durham trash trap is Zip's Car Wash, where trash accumulates, covers the local floodplain, and then flows directly into Third Fork Creek and into our trash trap. We recommend that Durham place a fence around this car wash so that it doesn't get into our public waterways, and the responsibility for collecting that litter shifts back to the business. This is a relatively simple fix that can be replicated with other big litter sources near streams. Another recommendation for reducing plastic pollution is making erosion control measures more natural and safer for our environment and water supply. We routinely find old plastic silt fences and netting in our cleanups, and these plastic fencings, they're quick to degrade, and they break down in our environment, and instead of preventing pollution like they're supposed to, they create it. We encourage Durham to require more environmentally friendly erosion control for public works projects, and we have documents to share with more information. I know that there are certain things that we are unable to do right now with state legislation, but there are still ways to incentivize folks to use less plastic materials that litter our water bodies. Thank you all for listening, and we encourage you to get involved with our work. We have a big cleanup event and trash trap cleanout on March 16th, and we'll be at the Durham Southwest Regional Library on March 11th presenting our comprehensive water quality report, the State of the Haw. We wanted to keep it quick, but we welcome any questions either now or by email at emily@hawriver.org. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And these mechanisms are quite impressive. Want to see it in person?
Yeah, they're incredible. We're having a trash truck clean out on March 16th. If anyone wants to join, it's really an incredible community event. We've had a lot of public support, and there's a lot of really beautiful things that have come out of it.
Good deal. Colleagues?
Madison, thanks for the presentation. You went quickly through the recommendations here for plastic reduction. Can you just say a little bit more about this idea of wildlife-friendly ways to control erosion and what some? I know there's a lot of proposals you've identified here. Like, what are the 2 or 3 top things we could do as a city right now to address erosion control in a more wildlife-friendly way?
That's a great question. I want to check in to see if Emily's had the chance to join.
What was the name?
Yeah, I am here if you guys can hear me.
Yeah, we can
hear you. Thank you.
Great. I can even turn my
we can see you
camera
too.
on. Hi.
Hi.
So I'm so appreciative that Madison could be there with you all today. The list of, the 2 or 3 things right now that I would recommend are using those, having requirements for the devices in sediment and erosion control issues. You all know very well that there's preemption laws right now that prevent municipalities from prohibiting single-use plastic containers, but there's not anything in that law about other things outside of containers. So we're really working with municipalities right now to promote alternatives that are stormwater erosion any kind of construction materials that we see in our streams all the time. These, like Madison said, break down very quickly and they get trapped in our stream banks. And so that can be included in a unified development ordinance to have requirements for stormwater and sediment and erosion control measures.
Thank you.
And Emily, could you also just, are there other communities that have done this? Can you give us examples of communities that have sort of pursued these kind of policies to improve the ways we control erosion that are not so wildlife unfriendly?
Sure. So I've worked with Chapel Hill Stormwater Community, or the Stormwater Department, to make sure that their programs, their sites that are within their own stormwater and their local government have these wildlife friendly materials. They have not yet put it into their unified ordinance for their entire jurisdiction to cover all of this projects that happen within the jurisdiction, but it's already in place for their own properties.
Thank you.
How often are you all having to change the trash caps, the trash catches?
So those trash traps, that physical mechanism, they can be in there for up to 10 years. But as far as how often we go and clean them out, we go about they're very resilient. But we go in about once a month. We have volunteers. Our last Durham trash trap clean out was a few weeks ago. We had about 25, 30 people come out and help us clean out. We schedule them about once a month, and you can sign up to be a volunteer on our website, and we'll send you out emails.
There's an Adopt a Street program statewide. Is there like an Adopt a Creek program that you know of?
We don't run those types of things. Durham Stormwater might be more integrated in that kind of work. Maybe Emily knows more.
Well, thank you for taking the lead on creating that program.
Thank you.
Look forward to organizations adopting a creek to help clean up. Okay, we just kind of make policy on the spot. Not officially, but keep that noted, all right? Councilmember Freeman.
Thank you. I think that's why Ellaby Creek Watershed Association exists. They adopted that creek. I will say that I wanted to know if the lakes, because of the trash traps are kind of like a later evolution, is there any way that you've thought of to address the trash that's still sitting atop many of watershed sides and areas to collect that trash as well?
Yeah, so we do regular trash cleanups, just generally. We have one coming up on March 16th, and the same day, our big giant cleanup-a-thon. There are also lots of other fantastic organizations, like I believe it's called Clean Up Jordan Lake. There's Lower Haw area, I'm butchering that. But there's a lot of different environmental organizations that do these kinds of cleanups. What I think is really special about our organization is we do these cleanups, but we also do them in a systematic way where we are collecting data and we're using that data for advocacy. We're not here to necessarily clean up after people's mistakes. We want to make sure those mistakes aren't made in the first place. And so I think that's what sets our organization apart from other cleanup crews. But there are lots of fantastic organizations, including our own, that do regular cleanouts of places like Jordan Lake.
And then I just wanted to make sure it was clear where to find the white papers that you have published.
Yeah, so this right now, we're still working on some more comprehensive documents, but we have a story map on our website that kind of walks people through all of our data. And the wonderful folks at the Duke Environmental Law and Policy Clinic have created a dashboard. So all of this data is available to the public the instant that it's recorded. And this is all across the entire state too. So we all submit our data to this dashboard, and that's on our website. If you want to learn more about those specifics. And we're working more on distinct policies that we can use all of this types of litter to recommend and write white papers like you mentioned.
That's all.
One last thing. Madison, thanks, Emily, for joining my phone. Emily mentioned that the legislature has preempted local governments from enacting ordinances that would regulate single-use plastic, right? So that's something we can't do. But I'm just wondering, from your perspective, and Emily as well, if you want to chime in, what's the what do we need to communicate to our residents? What are things consumers can do, since we can't regulate that ourselves as a local government? What are the most important things consumers can do to reduce the amount of trash that you described to that's being littered and coming into our creeks? In terms of communication, public education, what can we do in which we support?
That's a fantastic question. I want to make sure Emily has a chance to chime in on that.
Sure. I think that the preemption laws that went through last session were pretty devastating and don't serve the public. These are laws that were put into place to protect the retail merchants. So I think first and foremost, we need to be paying attention to who is making those decisions and who they are actually representing. But on an independent scale for personal behavior changes, I think being aware of, where our trash actually goes and using reusable materials when possible. Every time there's a major storm event or anything like that, I'm out in my yard making sure that everything is secured and that the trash cans don't turn over. And we see a lot of trash coming in from parking lots and curb inlets. And so really connecting that to the general public for public education. Every time there's a storm drain on the side of a road, that storm drain goes to a creek. And so if there's trash that's collecting along sidewalks and alongside of roads, that's going to end up in our streams. And I think people are very disconnected from how this stream of water running down the street actually gets into the creeks that we want to protect.
Thank you. I just want to say thank you for the presentation. I know there's been several rounds of previous councils working with Don't Waste Durham, in particular, specifically on how we could manage our trash better, and it was particularly devastating when we got preempted from doing that. I know there's been conversations around what the city solid waste department can do around education and potentially, hopefully, running some kind of program for businesses to start opting out of plastic cutlery and different types of to-go containers, and figuring out a community-wide wash station that a lot of, lots of entities or organizations in the city could potentially use communally. So I just want to lift up that vision. And I think at our last budget retreat, I named that Don't Waste Durham had a couple of budget asks. So thank you.
All right, those are all our comments. Thank you all so much. Thanks for being here. I may be reaching out to you all personally. We do have the Ellaby Creek Watershed Association. The concept I'm speaking about is a bit more broader, so I'll reach out. Thank you.
Thank you so much again.
All right, colleagues. What was that next one? Oh, yeah. So we had, as you all know, I'm pretty strict on our rules as far as folks signing up before, but we had some folks coming from work, city workers, that want to make sure that I did get a chance to hear them. So I'm going to make an exception. There was one additional person that was getting off the bus to get here in time. So I want to go back. Julian Mack is online now. Julian, can you hear me? We're back to Citizens Matters.
Yes, I can. Yes, I can hear you.
All right, welcome. You have 3 minutes.
Yes. I'm a Durham bus operator, and my bus got shot up back in November. And me and all the other operators, we just have big concerns about the safety of us and our passengers. And we just want somebody to recognize that it's a problem and that we need the support from the city to do something about it. The day my bus got shot up, I came home, I shared it with my wife and my kids. And we all got families to come home to every day. And I just, you know, every day on my way to work, I say a prayer that I can get back home to my wife and my kids, because we be in some dangerous situations. Not just our operators, but the passengers as well. Uh, Pretty much that's about all I got to say. But I thank y'all for letting me share my story.
Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing that with us. The next person I have there, all in person. Where are the rest of those cards? I have Sarah Maxwell. And after Sarah, I have Khalid Harley. Okay. Jareen Gribbs.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. You have 3 minutes.
All right. Let me know if you can hear me. I'm Sarah Maxwell. I'm a Go Durham bus driver. Durham saw 49 murders last year. Since we Go Durham bus drivers travel every major street in Durham, we are witness to much of this violence. And sometimes it engulfs our buses. Honorable Mayor, honorable councilors, I want to recognize you. 3 months ago, a hail of bullets rained down on a Route 8 bus, and you just heard the bus driver that happened to. 3 months ago, no one was injured, but the passengers and the driver on that bus must carry the terror of those moments for the rest of their lives. We are here to demand that you act. When an act of violence affects the Black community, when an act of violence affects our passengers, our drivers, and our workers, we demand that you instruct the police chief and work with the district attorney to bring the perpetrators to justice. We Durham City bus drivers sit for 8, 10, 12 hours at a time, wearing out our backs, our hands, and our wrists. We carry disabled adult bodies in our arms. We clean up vomit and bodily waste. We are exposed to the passengers' saliva and shouts and epithets. We do so at a humble wage and without complaining, until we begin to suspect that assaults on us are of no particular concern to city and judicial officials. We demand that the City of Durham work actively for our safety and bring the perpetrators of violence against us to justice. Durham saw 853 shootings last year, a 12% increase over the previous year. Meanwhile, felony convictions have gone down. No one's life is dispensable, no matter the color of their skin, their economic class, or the vital and underappreciated role they play for the City of Durham. We will not stand idly by as our brothers and sisters come under the line of fire and no arrests are made. Dear Mayor and City Council, it is time to act. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Any of the other names that I called, are you here? Okay. I want to let you know you are heard. I had a question. Right, and just this is a very serious matter. I'm going to reach out to our staff to make sure that we're ensuring that this is communicated with the what is the technical term? The opera.
Fixed route carrier.
Yeah, the carrier, the service that Go Durham works directly with, and just for the public's information, because we want to allow, well, I don't want to get too technical, but there is a middle operator between the city and our drivers, but these are our drivers, they're our residents, and I want to make sure you are heard and make sure we're communicating with them to make sure they're acting. So our pressure has to be activated there. And so I'll personally be reaching out as well. Okay. All right, our next item, back to the pulled items was, which one was it? The presentation.
Yes, so the next.
It was Haw River, then it was
Quarterly financial.
quarter, okay. Director Reardon, we are on you with the quarterly financial report. Welcome.
Welcome. I'm going to just pull it up here. Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, members of council, Christina Reardon, Budget and Management Services, and I am here today to deliver our second quarter financial report. Many of the information that I'm providing you today is, some of it will be a repeat from the budget retreat we had last Friday. This is a report that we do 4 times a year with our friends in finance who are here with me as well today. And we are about halfway through the year, and so I'll be providing you with an update of where we are and where we think we'll end the year for this fiscal year. I'll start out talking about the general fund, which, as you all know, is where most of our departments sit. About 24 of our 27 departments sit in the general fund. The 2 major revenue sources for that fund are property and sales tax. And so when we talk about expenditures for the general fund, we are, our projection for year end is that all departments will end within budget, with many of them coming in under budget for expenditures. Large portion of the expenditure savings are from vacancy rates in some of the departments, and so we are anticipating at the end of the year to have a positive budget variance of $5.9 million in, or almost $6 million for expenditures. And then this is kind of giving you a breakdown of the expenditures. About $4.3 million of that is coming from personnel savings, and about 1.7 in expenditure savings. This is just a summary of what I've kind of talked about. Expenditures are projected to be about $6 million less than budgeted, personnel at about 4.3, operating at about 1.7, and as I said before, no departments are projected to go over budget this fiscal year. Moving on to revenues in the general fund. We have most of our revenue sources coming in either at budget, with the exception of a couple of revenue sources. Our occupancy, hotel, motel occupancy tax is doing very well, and we anticipate that this revenue source will be about $767,000, $100,000 to the good at the end of the year. Our utility and franchise tax, we are expecting that to come in under budget. This is a revenue source that mostly has to do with municipal sales of telecommunications and video programming. So it's a source where it's cable franchise and home phones, and so it's a revenue source that has been decreasing in previous years. And then our Powell bill has been very strong as well. That's a state revenue source. We get 2 payments a year, and that is about $1.1 million over budget by the end of the year. And then we also expect our charges for services to be slightly over budget as well, which comes to about $1.4 million, which taking the revenues and the expenditures is a 7.4 positive budget variance for the general fund, which is good news. Just talking a little bit about property tax, which is our major revenue source, especially in the general fund. You'll be reminded that all property tax bills are due at the beginning of January, and we do project that our property tax for this year will come in at budget. At the end of our second quarter, we were slightly under where we were the previous year, but we don't expect there to be any issues with that, and do expect that we will receive our full budget by the end of the year. For sales tax is on a 3-month delay, so the numbers you are seeing in front of you are through October collections. At the end of the second quarter, we were under budget from where we were last year. But I will say that we've had, and I think a lot of that was due to some sales tax refunds, so refunds that we refund some of the sales tax for nonprofits. So we had some large refunds in both July and August that may have affected that first or second quarter number. But by the end of November, we are slightly ahead of where we were at this point last year. So we do feel like sales tax, a very conservative estimate would be that we will end the year at budget. But sales tax has slowed, as you know, this is a revenue source that has seen a lot of growth over the last several years. We're not seeing that amount of growth, but still doing well. So this gives you an overview of just the revenue sources that I've been talking about, breaking out that $1.4 million sales tax, as I talked about, at budget, property tax at budget, utility franchise tax under budget, and then charges for services, occupancy tax, and Powell bill all over budget by the end of the year, which is good news. This is a chart that you saw at the last council budget retreat, so I won't spend a huge amount of time on it, but it just kind of breaks down those major revenue sources, and you can kind of see comparisons from last fiscal year on Q2 to this fiscal year. Moving on to our enterprise funds. The first fund I want to talk about is our water and sewer fund, which, as you know, is funded through user fees. This fund is expected to have a positive variance, budget variance at the end of the year by $2.7 million. A large portion of that is personnel services, which are expected to be under budget by $1.7 million. And then operating expenses and operating revenues are expected to come in at budget. As you can see from the revenues here, most revenues are expected to come in at budget. The one section is investment income, which is doing much better this year, and so is making a little bit of a difference in this fund. Water and sewer expenses, as you can see here, the thing to point out is the personnel services, which is due to those vacancies, so they'll be coming in under budget in the fund for that. Moving on to our transit operations. Transit is projected to come in, they will have a positive variance budget of $4.1 million. And there are expected to come in under budget due to some delayed service enhancements. And just as a reminder, the transit fund does receive some grant funding. There's about $6.5 million in FY24 of federal grant money and $3.4 million of state. And also this fund is supported by tax revenue, so about 3.75 cents, or about $15.5 million, is budgeted in the transit fund for property tax. Here's a breakdown of the transit operation revenues, and as you can see, about $1.3 million in grant revenue, which has to do with our transit plan. So some of those service enhancements are reimbursable. So if we don't do the service enhancements, we don't receive the revenue. So that's where some of the under budget is coming for that revenue source. And then the expenditures here, with personnel services being slightly over, and then operating expenses being under by $4.2 million. Moving on to our solid waste fund. Their operating expenses are projected to be under budget by $427,000. And then personnel services are projected to be over budget by $209,000. And then their positive budget variance of $345,000. So this is a breakdown of that, the revenues that I was talking about, with operating revenues coming in slightly under budget and then this is a breakdown of the expenditures, with personnel being slightly over and operating expenditures coming in under budget for a positive budget variance of $345,000. So moving on to the Stormwater Fund, this fund is expected to be over budget in operating revenue, and then under budget in some of their expenses for personnel and operating. And the positive budget variance for the Stormwater Fund is $7.6 million. So as you can see, they are projecting to be revenues to be over budget by $6.5 million. Some of that is due to some streamlining of some of the bill collection that they've been doing. Also, some development will also have an impact on that as well, too. So that they are expecting some strong revenue numbers at the end of the fiscal year. And then moving on to their expenses, you can see that they are projecting to be under budget in both personnel and operating expenditures. Parking fund is projected to be under budget in revenues and slightly over budget in operating expenditures. The parking fund, just as a reminder, does receive a subsidy from our debt service fund for some existing debt in the fund. And then their projected variance is a negative budget variance of $326,000. This is a kind of snapshot of the parking fund's revenue, and like I said, they are expected to come in under budget for some of their operating revenues, and expected to be slightly over in their personnel services.
Ms. Reardon?
Yes.
Let me just make sure I'm understanding this correctly. So the parking fund does not pay for itself. Is that right?
Well, the operating in that revenue line, the operating revenues you're seeing are the fees that they charge for parking fees, but there is a portion of the fund that does receive debt service payments as well, too. So, and this is a fund that has been significantly impacted, especially during COVID, and so they have, had experienced some revenue loss during that point in time too, and that has affected the fund as well.
Was it operating positively before COVID?
I would have to check on that to make sure. I don't want to answer that, you know. We can find out for you, in other words.
Okay. Thank you. You can keep going.
You can continue. Colleagues, I'll recognize you when we have questions for just make sure they can keep the flow.
You want to wait till after the presentation, or something? Yeah.
Okay. And then these are just some of the other major funds that we have. Our ballpark fund is expected to meet our FY24 operating revenue projections. And then our DPAC fund has a positive budget variance of $1.1 million. And inspection fund is expected to come in over budget for their revenues with a positive budget variance of $820,000. And these funds, you will see more detail on these funds in the exhibit pages that you received in your packet. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Councilmember Rist?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I was trying to pull my thoughts together. Ms. Reardon, thanks for the presentation, first of all. It seems like in most of these funds, or it doesn't seem like, in most of these funds there was a positive variance to the good, right? Could you tell me what the total of all if you add up all the variances, there were a couple that were negative, but just what's the total? We're talking maybe 15, 17 million or so?
Yeah, I generally don't look at it that way, but so I haven't done the math, but I could do the math. I'm
just jotting it down right here, yeah. It seems like it's around 15 million or so. Okay, thanks.
Did you have more questions about the parking?
Manager Page, do we have any insight into parking and if we are expecting it to be able to pay for itself at some point in the future? Sorry to put you on the spot here.
That's okay. I'm always on the spot. For all of our enterprise funds, we have multi-year financial planning and projections. So even though we don't have a crystal ball, we do make projections, and in those projections, we're always trying to assess when we expect the fund to be break even or positive. So just like the rest of our funds that you see here, there is a multi-year projection that will show when that will happen. It will be over time unless something major happens in those funds. So if you're looking specifically at the parking fund, that answer can be obtained. I'm not certain exactly what year it is, but every year we refresh those projections because we have to give consideration to what is actually happening. We may have projected parking to be at 90% capacity, but it ends up being 95%. Certainly those projections change every year, but our goal is that any of our enterprise funds, with the tax support that they're receiving and the fees that are coming in based upon the service that we're selling, that it will at least break even because it's an enterprise.
Yeah, okay. And it sounds like that one just took a big hit from COVID and has just not recovered. Yeah.
That is correct.
One other quick question. Can you just explain, when we look at the slide with major revenues comparing 23 and 24 and 22, fiscal year 23 and fiscal year 22, and 23 is lower, can you just explain why it's lower?
Are you still talking about parking?
Are you talking
No.
You're talking about general fund?
General fund.
The slide where I have, I think it's
The bar chart.
this slide where you're talking here. This one right here. Is that the one you're talking about?
Yes.
Yes, so this is just a snapshot of where we were in Q2 for FY23 and where we are in Q2 for FY24. So you will notice that the revenue, a lot of this is timing for some of these revenue sources. So we are under revenue when you look at where we ended the year on December 31st. The biggest portion of that would be in property tax, which we were down about $7.5 million from where we were in FY23. But when which I talked about in the retreat last Friday, when I look at the January and February numbers, I just looked at them today, we're at like 95% of our budget. So although we were down in December, I don't anticipate it to be a problem by the end of the year. Tax bills did go out a little later this year, so that may have had an impact on where we ended the Q2.
Thank you.
Alex, any other questions?
I'm going to follow up with my question. So just back to my question about the surpluses. So by my math, it's maybe like if you compare it to the total budget of $610 million, it's maybe like 2% of surplus, right? So not a huge number. I guess my question is more, especially on the general fund side, where the personnel costs were the biggest chunk of the surplus, right? $4.3 million. And so, and this is not the issue of vacancies is not a short-term issue for the city. This has been going on for a while. I'm just kind of curious, from your perspective or the manager's perspective, what is our policy about maintaining positions on the books, which is a large budget cost right here, that are potentially we're not able to fill in a year, for example. So how long do these stay on the books? How do we adjust those to make sure the budget reflects the reality of what we're accomplishing or trying to accomplish as a city?
Madam Manager.
So thank you for that question for us. So as everyone is aware, we had a very impactful coronavirus or period of time when there was a lot of uncertainty around just the ability to recruit, retain, how we may be changing the way we deliver services. And some of that is normalizing now. And during the period of time where it is uncertain how we may be using funded positions in the future, we adjust our overall budget through not budgeting 100% of those funded positions, because it would be unrealistic to think that we're going to fill all of them, and that would be the case in any year. So we make adjustments to the amount of our funded positions for the budget overall. And that is one of the ways that we actually balance our budget with funded FTEs on the books, but we are estimating what portion of those FTEs that we probably are going to fund in the next year. So instead of eliminating them, we collectively estimate how many we may have, and we're looking at trends around those vacancies in preparing the overall budget.
Thank you.
All right. Colleagues, thank you all so much. Director, thank you. Yeah. Our next item, our next presentation, I believe, is our our quarterly crime report.
Good afternoon.
Afternoon, welcome.
Mayor Williams, Mayor Pro Tem Middleton, Durham City Council members, and City of Durham staff that are here and watching virtually. I am coming before you once again to present the 2023 fourth quarter report. So just a little background, as I always say, as you understand that this report is really just the overall snapshot of where we ended up this quarter, but also previous quarters for Part 1 violent crime and Part 1 property crime, our clearance rates, and also how we respond to those crimes. So this slide that you have before you, this essentially shows our 3-year average and where we ended up and whether we were above where we ended up last year, or did we fall below, and also the averages. So what you notice right off, so red is never good. So red is definitely never good. But we noticed that we did have notable increases in rape, and we had an increase in homicide last year. We ended up at 49 homicides for the year. Our robberies, though, we saw a significant reduction in our robberies compared to where we ended up in 2022. And so that is notable because last year we had what seemed to be a never-ending cycle of armed robberies from persons. In particular, our armed robberies that involved one or more Hispanic victims. And the reduction really did come from the amount of work that staff put into investigating each one of these robberies, but also dismantling some of these group systems that were operating and committing these robberies. So for context, we had 484 is what you see. 76% of those robberies were from people. And that in itself is a reduction of about 14% or so from the previous years. 39% of those robberies were from Hispanic victims, one or more Hispanic victims in those robbery cases. 24% of those robberies were from commercial businesses, and then 88% of those involved our retail businesses. Firearms were consistently being used in about 55% of all of our robbery cases. But overall, we did have a reduction of 3.79% in our overall violent crime. I do want to just maybe take a moment now while I'm thinking about it to highlight the work that's being done by our staff, specifically in our aggravated assaults. So we've heard today from our community servants with Go Durham, and you know, no one should ever have to experience violent crime, period. But we know that we live in a world where that happens. Violent crime happens in any community. Our investigators, whether it's a property crime or it's violent crime, they investigate each incident to the fullest until either they make an arrest or they've exhausted all leads. And so I asked staff just to take a snapshot of 2023, how many of our aggravated assaults that occurred directly were linked to the Go Durham buses. And so we had seven events in 2023 that we could link directly to an event that occurred on a Go Durham buses. This is separate from what happened at bus stops, separate from what ended up in the area within 400 feet of a bus stop. We had 7 events. 3 of those events were robberies. The rest were aggravated assaults, either by a gun or a stabbing or some other weapon. Investigators cleared by arrest 3 of those cases by arrest. That means someone was physically taken into custody. 2 of those cases are pending warrant service, which means investigators discovered through looking at all of the evidence that they feel very strongly this person or these people committed that particular offense. And so 2 of those are pending warrant service. The most recent case that occurred in November that you heard our community servants with Go Durham mention is still open. We are having difficulties with our victim, of course, not wanting to cooperate fully with the investigation. But that's not, the case is still open. We're not going to let that stop us. We'll keep moving forward. And then we have 1 case that is inactive. So we, and I say we, I don't do the hard work. They do the hard work. The investigators do the hard work. My staff does the hard work. They are committed to investigating every single case to the fullest extent of the law and within their span of control. It is then, that case is then turned over to our district attorney's office for prosecution, which is a separate arm of the criminal justice system. So our shooting incidents. So we had somewhat of, if you remember, I believe it was last quarter I talked about, we seem to have more shooting incidents with less persons shot in those incidents. So our confirmed shooting incidents increased by 11.8% in 2023 compared to 2022, but the number of victims that were actually shot in those incidents decreased by 13.6%. We were up 5% for our fatal shootings as we were up in our homicides, but our non-fatal shootings were down. And so I think that may lend to some of our discussion we'll have in a little bit around technology and around Shotspotter. 79% of our incidents were initiated by Shotspotter that had no corresponding 911 call, and that is significant. There were 1,100, almost 1,200, well, 1,119 guns seized in 826 incidents. So what's significant about that is we are seizing multiple guns in these incidents. It's not just 1 or 2, there's multiple guns. And so that gives us, that puts us being up 9.5% year over year. So Oftentimes, people don't really think about property crime until property crime starts to be so noticeable as what we're seeing here lately. It's been a nationwide trend. Motor vehicle theft is driving us in property crime and continues to do so. We are up in all of our categories, our burglaries, larcenies, and motor vehicle theft. Motor vehicle theft most significantly. We are up 134% in those categories, which drives us up almost 19% increase in all categories property crime. So how does that look for each one of our categories? So at the end of the year, we had 1,359 burglaries, 1,359 actual burglary offenses. 61% of those were from homes, so were from residences. So that's an 11% increase. And this is not unlike a trend that's being seen nationwide in our residential burglaries, and also here in our area. We had 7,597 larceny offenses. 42% of those were from motor vehicles, so it's up 9%. So you always hear me talking about guns, how many guns were taken from those cars. 54% of all stolen guns that we had came from motor vehicles. 51% of those vehicles had guns that were stolen, they were unlocked. So they were unlocked. 31% of our larcenies were related to shoplifting, so that's always going to be, we are always going to have the shoplifting. And then in both categories, burglaries and larcenies, our tools really kind of outpaced our stolen property overall. So let's talk about motor vehicle theft. So here's what we are seeing. Increase in motor vehicle theft, obviously our Hyundais and Kias have trended over the last year or so. We call this kind of the social media effect. This really started once folks that decided to put their intelligence into criminal activity versus something being actually a worthwhile endeavor and being a productive member of our community, decided to start putting it into showing each other how to steal cars. And it started on TikTok, and it caught fire, and we started to see this trend nationwide. So 85% of our vehicles that were stolen, and this doesn't include the attempts and vehicles that weren't registered or not registerable, those vehicles have been recovered. So within the city, we see a lot of vehicles stolen and recovered soon after they are stolen. And what that tells us is that many of these vehicles are being used in crimes and they're dumped pretty quickly. And then those groups are going out and seeking out more vehicles in which to steal in order to commit crime. 23% of those vehicles that were stolen were left unattended or had the keys somewhere in the vehicle, so the key fobs were in the cars. And that happens seasonally. We see that most often when the weather starts getting cold. People will warm their cars up and either inadvertently leave their key fobs closed or will leave the key actually in the vehicle. So that's a crime of opportunity. So this is, for me, I love to really talk about our clearance rates. So what you see here are numbers, but what I see is the hard work and dedication of our entire team, our sworn and non-sworn staff that work very well together in order to clear our cases. So a clearance rate is essentially calculated by dividing the total number of offenses cleared in any one given time period and by the total number of offenses that were reported in that same time period, and that's how you get your clearance rate. The FBI reports on their clearance rates on a national level, and so we will kind of gauge how well or not well we're doing on our clearance rates by how the FBI is reporting. So what you'll notice in our homicide, so we, and I still don't know how they do it, but they're amazing. Our teams clear homicide rates consistently over the national clearance. This year in 2023, they cleared at 71.4%, which is well over. And that's not an easy feat, and they do very well. I do want to highlight some of the other cases are aggravated assaults. We are clearing slightly below, but for the amount and the number of aggravated assaults that these investigators investigate, I think that they are doing very well in the clearance category for this category. And then if you start looking at burglaries and larcenies and motor vehicle theft, what you'll start to see is we're trending downward on the clearances. Does this mean that investigators are not attempting or trying, or they're not putting their all into it? No. Traditionally, crimes, property crimes are some of the hardest crimes in which to bring someone, an offender or offenders, to justice for, because of the you have to leave something behind, right? Oftentimes we have to have good video, or we have to be able to retrieve DNA or prints, and everything has to align in a big way in order to clear some of these cases. And what we've seen is we have shared folks that are committing crimes in Durham, but also going to other jurisdictions, our surrounding jurisdictions, and committing those crimes there. So we make it a point to really work with other jurisdictions in order to affect some change within our clearance rates for especially our property and violent crime. So 86% of our violent crime cases were cleared by an arrest. So why is that significant? Because it means a person or people were identified and brought to justice, and they were placed into custody.
Can you repeat that one?
Yes, 86% of our violent crime. So our violent crime cases, they were cleared by arrest, which means that person or persons has actually been brought to justice and served on those warrants, and at some point was taken into physical custody. 14% of those cases were exceptionally cleared. So what that means is that there was evidence to support an arrest. However, we didn't have maybe the final piece. There was an element beyond our control that did not really allow us to be able to effect an arrest or obtain an arrest warrant. And sometimes that means the victim suddenly now is unwilling to cooperate, or maybe the offender passed away, or there was prosecution declined by the district attorney's office. And so those are, when we talk about ex-clearing cases, that's what we're talking about. We identified an offender, but we don't have all of the pieces that we need in order to be able to charge them. 94% of the property crime cases were cleared by an arrest. So while our clearance rates were a little lower in our property crimes, we were high in actually taking individuals into custody. So I show this just so that everyone knows where we are trending, especially for our response to calls for service from January to December. And I don't really think that it is a huge surprise to everyone that we are trending upward, and our response times are increasing. So we've increased. Every year we increase just a little bit more in our response times. This year it's about 1.9% from 2022. And our average response time to our priority 1 calls for service, so think lights and sirens calls, that response time has increased. Our target for that is 5 minutes and 48 seconds, so we have not met the target. The percent of the calls that we did answer in less than 5 minutes was about 49%. So do want to show you just kind of what the picture of our violent crime rates look year to year. So we generally report crimes based on raw totals, but we want to see them in what does it look like population. So as population changes over time, what do those violent crime rates look like? So from 2000 to 2023, just last year, the population of our great city increased 63%. That's a lot. It's a lot of people. Increased 63%. But our violent crimes remained somewhat unchanged over a period of time. In fact, our violent crime rate actually fell 38.3% over that time span period. And the national rate actually fell 24.9%. So oftentimes when you see what we show here, there's also a big possibility that the nationwide trends are also trending downward for the same type of crime. So in 2000, the Durham rate was 93.1% higher than the national rate, and it was 58.5% higher in 2023. Okay. So I always really like to, we like to highlight and talk about our staffing and kind of bring you up to date on where we are at the end of each quarter for staffing. So at the end of our fourth quarter, so by December 31st, we were at 76% staffing. And our non-sworn, we were at 86% staffing. And so what this essentially shows is, yes, this is, you know, we are not immune to the staffing issues that everyone is feeling, no matter how small your municipality is or how large it is. Everyone is feeling it across our country. What we like to do is take this and say, well, what more can we do to make this profession more attractive, make people want to join our profession and come to our city and the City of Durham Police Department. And so we have increased our engagement around recruiting. We have really started to highlight our officers as human beings, because that's what they are. Our non-sworn staff really trying to pull the curtain back so that you can meet our non-sworn team members. We have changed how we onboard our candidates now. So, you know, we changed very early on how we test and evaluate recruit candidates, police candidates, and we did see an increase in applications and also successful applications and candidates coming into the actual academy. So when you're hired, you're extended the hire offer, you come in as a pre-hire. So you are basically in the queue awaiting your first day of the actual police academy. And during that time, we have, over the last 6 months or so, actually started really prepping and priming our pre-hires for what they are going to experience when day one of the academy. So it's not like throwing them in the deep end of the pool when it's really cold water. It's dipping their toes in very slowly and getting them used to what they are going to see when they start the first day of the academy. We really start to focus on and work on their physical fitness, as well as their academic ability, right? How well are they able to study, and also trying to give them tools and give them a peek into what they will see with their curriculum. And this allows them the opportunity to bond with each other. You can't get through a police academy if you don't feel supported, if you don't have that bond with some of your academy mates. And so we've seen, I think, actually we've heard very good feedback from our officers that were some of the first officers that started this new pre-hire initiative, that they did feel like it was helpful for them. And so it's helped us successfully to follow and keep our officers in the program successfully until the very end. So in the fourth quarter, we had 94 applicants for our applicant testing. So this is just in the fourth quarter. And that I want to note, the most applicants that we've had during any quarter since the first quarter of 2018. So that's saying that there is the interest. People are interested in the profession. We can't do it all for them, so a lot of that is on them, but they are taking a chance and actually coming to test. For the entire year of 2023, we had 298 applicants that actually came to test. That's the most applicants we've had since 2018. We had 306 applicants that particular year. So we maintain and we still do our 30 by 30 initiative, and I do want to just say a special acknowledgement to Captain Ronell Hinton. When I got here, she was in training and recruiting, and she brought forward the initiative, and so we adopted her idea. It's actually a nationwide initiative. And we signed the pledge. So it's a coalition of police leaders, professional organizations that have committed to increase representation of women in the ranks by 30% until the year 2030, or by the year 2030. And so in 2023, we had a total of 52 female applicants that applied to become sworn police officers, and that's the highest number of female applicants that have applied with the Durham Police Department since 2017, and that is commendable of our staff. And we currently have 70 females out of 401 sworn officers within our ranks, and just of note, we actually are higher than the national average. National average, I believe, is like 12%. We're 17.5% female officers in the Durham Police Department. So U visas, we continue to process our U visas quarter by quarter. So you'll see this is just a snapshot, and it ebbs and flows just depending on the quarter. I'm not sure that there's a necessary trend maybe attached to that, but you'll see that in 2023, or October through December of 2023, we received 40 U visa or visa U requests, and 30 of those requests were approved and 10 were denied. Just for the group, we do, if we have denials, we do make contact with the representative that completed the paperwork to help them understand why the paperwork was denied, or if we have incomplete applications that come through, we will assist them in ensuring that they are completed so that we can make a sound decision. So I will always say, each one of you and everyone in this room and out virtually, please follow us on all of our social media platforms. We have great engagement. We push a lot of information out on social media, and we encourage everyone to like and follow and share. That concludes my presentation, so I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Chief, for your presentation. Lots of information. Colleagues. Councilmember Baker.
So our clearance rates are amazing for homicide. Can you just explain how we are doing so well on homicide clearance rates, but we're a little bit below average on other, and we can just focus on the violent crimes. Why are we a little bit below average on the other ones? How are we so far above clearance rates on homicides compared to the FBI rates? And then how do we fill that gap? How do we improve on clearance rates for the other types of violent crime?
Yes, thank you for that. So essentially, homicides, just in the nature of the incident, typically you'll have a lot of evidence, a lot more evidence than maybe what you would normally have at any other scene. And you also have a human being that is no longer with us. And so when a homicide, occurs, we have on-call teams that will respond, and we have our forensic staff that will respond, and oftentimes we can retrieve digital evidence. So if there's a cell phone left behind, if there's video left behind, certainly shell casings and things like that, but we have a lot more, the potential of a lot more evidence to be left at the scene of a fatal shooting or a fatal incident than we would at a non-fatal one, which in essence, it decreases our chances of being able to clear the non-fatal cases because a lot of times people take the evidence that is critical with them. And so that's kind of in a nutshell why we have such a high clearance rate.
But why would we be so much high? Why would we have such a better clearance rate for homicides compared to everywhere else where they also have the same conditions of evidence? Well,
We have one of the best teams in the state of North Carolina and in the country. I'm not saying that because I decided to come back to the city of Durham. I would put them up against any team in this state. The amount of knowledge, the amount of just, training. Also, too, not because he's sitting here, but Mr. Sheese's shop, our intel folks, our forensics staff, our capabilities are far more advanced than many agencies in the state.
Thank you. And then just how can we fill the gap for the other types of violent crime? What do we need to improve there?
So, for us, it's how do we make our victims feel more comfortable with having the conversations with us, right? But without being pushy, right? How do we do that? I think it's when we can retrieve the casings and we can take the photos and retrieve the videos, but ultimately, if we don't have a victim that's surviving that's willing to say, yes, I know who that is, and yes, I feel if I stand up in court and I feel that I would be protected, ultimately they're going to back away from that and they're not going to do that. So for us, it's how do we make them feel more comfortable doing so? And I think, we are constantly trying to find the best way to navigate those waters, because we do understand that long after we're gone, our surviving victims have to live in the communities in which they were victimized. And, it's just making sure that they know that we're here. Whether you want to talk now or later, we're here, and we stand ready to help you solve your case.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Thanks, Councilmember Baker, for those questions. Rist?
Yeah, Chief, again, thank you for the presentation. Just following up on that line of questioning. So for those non-fatal shootings, and pardon my ignorance on this one, but would those appear under, where do those appear? Is that aggravated assault? Where would that show up in the statistics?
Correct. That would be your aggravated assaults. So anything involving your firearms and that are non-fatal, that does show up in aggravated assault.
And I know that data is not here broken out, but do you have, what's the clearance rate for those non-fatal shootings? Do you have that number?
Do you know, Jason? We can break that out, though, if that would be great, yeah. Sure, yes.
Thank you.
Colleagues? Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Chief, it's always good to see you.
Good to see you, sir.
Your command and staff, we continue to be grateful to the men and women under your command. Thank you for being with us today, and thank you for this report. So as I say often, it's really no consolation that the general numbers are going the right way to an individual who's been victimized, but it's important to say that. It's important to point out to our residents and citizens that in general, the numbers are going the right way, but we know we've still got a lot of work to do. I want to add my, celebratory remarks and congratulations to you on the clearance rates, given our staffing issues, given our challenges we face, as do many departments around the country. And you said it, I think you hit the nail on the head about our team and how excellent our department is and how celebrated our department is around this state and around the country. I do, and I want to use that as an on-ramp for my question. I have a very nuts and bolts policy question for you, an impact question for you. But first I want to say, I remember one of the things that most impressed me about you, Chief, when you were coming here and even before you came here, how you were unafraid to speak of your humanity, not just a uniform. You spoke very candidly about being the mother of a black son, and how you're not immune from the considerations that often come with that particular responsibility. And your uniform doesn't exempt you from that, and you're sensitive to that. You're sensitive to the issues we've had in policing in our country. You've been in the vanguard of discussions about how do we better police our communities, particularly communities of black and brown communities. I think that's evidenced in your commitment to U visa results and other things. With that said, my belief is that you wouldn't ask us for something or do something if you thought it was harmful to any community. And I think that's part of your brand, and I think that's why we've had so much success as a department. So I want to go back to the shooting incidents slide where you indicated via asterisk that 79% of the incidents that we responded to gunfire were initiated by Shotspotter technology, which of course is dark at this point. One of the things I love about local politics and municipal politics is the instant gratification. You see the pothole get fixed. You see the crane in the sky. You know they're responding to 911 calls. The other thing is that it's non-abstract in nature. It's right there in your face. So the decisions we make at the local level, unlike many decisions in politics, particularly the high-level ones, you immediately see your impact, those decisions, and they are life-impacting decisions. So my assumption is that when your department asked us for an extension on pending a report of Shotspotter, my assumption is that it was based upon something. My assumption was that if y'all thought it was doing bad or harm, you would have been the first, based upon what I know about you would have been the first to say, hey. So for me, at least intellectually, the comfort with asking for the extension was based upon probably numbers like over 75% of incidents that we were responding to were not initiated by 911. And for me, the problem with public knowledge is that you can't pretend you don't know it anymore. So when a request came to our council and we exercised our power to turn the sensors off, what we could not turn off was, one, the gunfire that we know those sensors were picking up, and what we could not turn off is what we already know. So we can turn the sensors off, but we know that didn't stop the gunfire. So my direct question to you, the nuts and bolts question is, because this number is reflective of when the sensors were on. Now that they're off, and we decided to turn them off as a council, what was the posture? What did y'all do? What was the posture response? How did we handle shootings in those areas that we did have aid and technology and that we no longer have? Was there any substantive or noticeable response in policy or response posture on the part of our officers?
No, we continued with the service that we have really set ourselves at a high standard and a high level. We continue with that service. We understand and recognize and obviously respect tremendously council's decision, but that's not going to keep us from performing at the highest level. So knowing that Shotspotter is a resource and a tool, we didn't have that, but that didn't mean that we reversed or went back to doing things as business as usual. One of the things that I would say is it's tremendously helpful that sound of shots fired calls. We had those proactively. We raised those from a priority 3 call to a priority 2 call. And that's been helpful, but really for us we knew that we needed to get on scene and get on scene quickly. We knew that we needed to try and collect as much evidence and locate and collect as much evidence as possible. But we also respected council's decision, but that did not have an effect on how we did our work.
Absolutely, thank you. And let me be clear, I'm not in no way asking you to opine upon the correctness or non-correctness of the council's decision, as you never do. And I think, and a part of our job is to exempt you from that. But the decisions do have impact, and it was a policy decision, and I wanted to get into some real world kind of data points on it. One other question regarding data. I know that response time is kind of a golden measure for us. The quicker we can get there, the better the outcomes for all involved, whether it's evidence collection, saving lives, possible arrests, whatever it may be. When you were before us, you had, and I didn't see it in this report, but you had reported that the response time for Shotspotter to Shotspotter incidents was actually better than the response time, the general response time for 911 calls. Do you have that number?
I do. I don't have it last time, but I do have it for the fourth quarter. So our median response time, or from the published ShotSpotter alert to when the first officer arrived, was 5 minutes and 11 seconds, and that was approximately 1 minute and 17 seconds for the call processing time, but we were still below what our target response time for priority 1 calls.
Okay. Thank you for that, Chief. Again, thank you for being with us, and please pass our regards to the men and women of your command. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I yield back.
Councilmember Caballero.
Good to see you, Chief. Thank you for the presentation. I just wanted to say that, going back, we've had lots of conversations, particularly around robberies targeting our Latino community. And I just wanted to say I know that we're trending in the right way, and I know that's because of just diligent work on your department with community and building trust in community. And that has played out, interestingly, in our climate surveys with residents. That was something that we reviewed last week at our budget retreat. And so I just wanted to thank you. I know that it is a big lift. I know that we've struggled to get enough bilingual, bicultural officers. It has been a struggle, but as I was, the last time you presented, there had been kind of a string, and it seems like it's gotten a little quieter. In general, I think the beginning of the year has been, I'm gonna knock on wood, a little quieter. Sometimes you can attribute it to the cold, but it hasn't been a particularly cold winter either. So I'm just hopeful that that is a trend. I really appreciate you starting to include the kind of long-term trends over 20 years, because as you can see, one homicide or 4 homicides, or, it can do a lot to our percentages year over year. And I think that it's really helpful, to tell the story that Durham is safer, regardless how people perceive it. We do need to tell the story around facts, and that we can get into a cycle, and I will comment on the news. The news are always here when you come. They don't show up often when we're telling good stories about Durham. They show up when there's something salacious to share. And I'll say it, I think it's personally because it links to a racist history of how Durham is perceived, not just in the Triangle, but across North Carolina. And so I'm just going to name it. I see the news here when there's something salacious to report around crime, and they can continue the story that, oh, Durham's unsafe. And I would say that if you look over our 20-year data, no, I think we've made some huge improvements. That is the diligent work of your department and also just the community broadly. And so I want to lift that up, and I think it's just really important to share that. And I appreciate the slide being included, and it's a change from a few years. We can, 1 or 2 things change percentages very drastically when you're looking at small data sets. And we do need to actually think about what are we seeing, what are the trends. Obviously, the dangerous side of that, we're seeing a lot of younger people carrying guns and shooting each other, and that's a trend we really need deep work on. That's not going to just take the police. We all know it's going to take everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Freeman, you have any comments?
I would just echo Councilmember Caballero's comments and appreciation of the way that the presentation is put together as well. And I would also echo, well, just to say, I really appreciate the way in which you're going about pursuing female officers and recruits in a way that our numbers are demonstrating that we are doing much better than the national average as well. So other than that, I think you're doing a great job. I want to be as supportive as possible for the work that you do, and I'll continue to have conversations. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, colleagues. Thank you, Chief. I want to add to that as well. I know Raleigh has some issues going on. No shade at Raleigh, but it seems to be Durham is a little more projected sometimes. So thank you all for doing the work you're doing. I know folks outside of the Bull City like to say, "Oh, don't go to Durham," and I like to tell them, "Stay where you are. We're good." I feel fine in Durham.
Me too.
And as some of you all know, some of the things that have happened lately, and I'm still walking out in public feeling safe, so thank you. I wanted to ask you, you probably don't have this data because I did not give it to you before, but there are some cities that we get compared to often as far as how we're trending, such as like Austin, Texas, or Portland, Oregon. Do you know how we're lining up in regards to violent crimes to those specific cities? And I ask about those because we are being compared to them as far as how we're trending in the housing market and economic development and so on.
I don't, but I know people.
Okay, I'm sure.
I surround myself with people that know more than me, so it's good.
And they also have similar political characteristics like Durham, so I'm just really interested in that. Another question I had was, do we know what the recommended percentage, and this, I'm going to ask this question with a grain of salt because we also have the Community Safety Department, which is very unique, and we want to continue to grow that alongside with, just being able to balance out a response to the issues we do have in violent crime and then mental health. But do we know what the recommended amount of officers we should have based on our population?
I don't know the exact number. What I can tell you is, well, we should have 100% of our officers. I'm going to say that. But whenever we look at our shifts, so that's really what we look at is a good indicator of where we are with the entire agency. We want to always be above 70, 80% staffing level for each one of our shifts. And so that's what we look at as a benchmark of how well we're doing within staffing. Because as you know, if we don't have the patrol officers, I can't send anyone to investigations, right? So that really is kind of where it starts.
A little more context on why I asked that question. The dirt bikes, for example, there were times on a Sunday I would see 200 to 300 dirt bikes. And then on average, we would have, I don't know, maybe 7 or 8, cruisers on the beat. I'm not sure however many, and I don't really want to say publicly how many, but I know it's not 200 or 300, and granted, I grew up riding dirt bikes. This was a struggle for me because I would see them like, oh, that's cool, but it's not cool when it's unsafe, and it's not cool when there's lots of drug transactions and weapons and all that stuff in the midst of some kids actually trying to have a good time. So with that being stated, one of the worst departments to be understaffed is the police department because, we had a situation where, the trash didn't get picked up, and the city started to smell in a sense, but I'll take city smelling over being understaffed and being shot at. So that does bring me concern, which also brings me a little discomfort when we're talking about response time. And I feel like it's sort of like it's like wishful thinking. How can we reduce the response time if we're so understaffed? And if we're understaffed, then what type of culture are we building here? Because we are responsible for you all. What type of culture are we building to ensure that people actually do want to come to this profession? So that is my discomfort. How do we, this question may even be rhetorical. We're trying to reduce response times without increasing the capacity of the force. And I just think that those two things are going the opposite direction. And so that's why I showed up to South Point to help recruit that night and take pictures and get folks to sign up when you all were recruiting. I'll continue to do that, and I'll state that confidently and publicly. So I really just wanted to say that's something that does concern me in the presentation. I don't want the officers or the entire force to feel bad when it's not even realistic to get to that target where we are now. But I do know that we holistically have to continue to work toward that. So as we continue to hear more data and more information, I'm going to base my decisions on that data and not how I personally feel. So thank you all. Thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you.
I sort of turned that question into a statement.
Rhetorical. Right.
Yep.
Yes. Well,
All right.
Mr. Mayor, if I could, if that concludes the questions, I would like to just have a point of personal privilege as we transition into the next, with your permission.
Yes, please.
So as we transition into our study results for sound thinking, formerly known as Shotspotter, with the good folks from the Wilson Center, I do want to just publicly commend my entire team that worked this year on probably one of the most groundbreaking pilots for this technology. And I am extremely thankful to have been able to witness it from my perspective. And what I can tell you, it was done very well. I have an amazingly capable group of sworn and non-sworn staff that understood the assignment, that understood that we were trying to hear all of the concerns of not just our council members, right, but also our community, because many of us understand and feel, how we understand how important it is that we're doing things the right way. I can't comment on who's doing what, where in another jurisdiction, but I know we have control over how we do things here in this great city. And so I want to just say thank you and commend my entire staff for their work. Having said all that, if I could just bring up, don't worry, I don't have a plaque or anything for you, Jason, but if I could just bring up Mr. Jason Sheese. You all know Mr. Sheese. He is our Analytical Services Manager. He will bestow the introductions at this point in time for staff that are present from both the Wilson Center, but also from Sound Thinking Shotspotter.
Good afternoon. I'm just going to transition the presentation here real quick as I get started. Okay, good afternoon, Mayor Williams, Mayor Pro Tem Middleton, members of council. My name is Jason Sheese. I am the Analytical Services Manager for the Police Department and the overall project manager for the Shotspotter pilot. It really is my privilege today to introduce Dr. Philip J. Cook, Professor Emeritus of Public Policy and Economics at Duke University. Honestly, he is one of the foremost experts in the country on the study of gun crime. Very early on in this process, in the interest of transparency, the Durham Police Department asked the Wilson Center for Science and Justice at Duke Law to conduct an independent evaluation of the Shotspotter pilot program. Thanks to the leadership of Faculty Director Brandon L. Garrett and Policy Director Angie Weiss-Gamel, the Wilson Center facilitated such an evaluation at no cost to the taxpayers of Durham. The evaluation was performed by Dr. Cook in conjunction with Adam Solomon, Assistant Professor of Economics at Clemson University, and Dr. Cook today will present their findings. I also want to mention in attendance today from the Wilson Center is policy analyst Lindsay Bass-Patel and researcher Pilar Kelly. In addition, there are representatives from Sound Thinking present today to answer any questions that you may have about the Shotspotter system itself, and those include Aaron Edwards, Senior Vice President of Sales, Paul Lazinski, Customer Success Director, and Tahira Moore, Director of Community Engagement. So without further ado, I introduce Dr. Philip Cook. You can just advance slides with that button right there.
Okay. Looks something I can manage. So, thank you, Jason, and good afternoon, Mayor Williams and the council members. Thanks for the opportunity to talk about this work. We have just wrapped up an evaluation that did begin in the fall of 2022 before the installation was actually implemented. And as he mentioned, I was working together with another economist, Adam Solomon, on using the data that was compiled by the Durham Police Department and by Jason's shop to analyze the process and the impact of the Shotspotter pilot project. Now, we've already begun the conversation about this, and some of what I'm going to say is going to be very well known to you, I'm sure. So I'll try not to bore you too much with that and skip ahead. But just let me say about myself and explaining why I'm here, that in my 50 years on the Duke faculty, one of my sustaining interests has been guns, gun violence, and gun violence prevention. And in recent years in particular, I've been looking at the policing function with respect to gun violence prevention. Written a book on it last year and continued to be interested. It was a real privilege to have the chance to actually engage, as I've done now several times in the last few years, on projects that concern the city of Durham, my city. So, as you know, the Shotspotter pilot was instituted on December 15th, 2022 in a 3-square-mile area that very small percentage of the city, but it incorporated about 29% of all of the gun violence. So relatively high rates of gun violence there. I think that what is important to understand about Shotspotter right in the first instance is that it's not a standalone system. It is, in fact, a supplement to the existing 911 system. And that was important to the evaluation that I did together with Adam, because the question is, what does it add to what we already have through 911? The chief mentioned that she had upgraded responses to gunshot calls as of December 15th, 2022 to priority 2. So 2 cars dispatched ordinarily, though without sirens and lights, but on a high priority. And that came with a carefully worked out protocol advising the patrol officers about their job when they responded in these cases. And the protocol included a statement that they should not use the Shotspotter notification, if there was one, as justification for detaining or arresting any persons on the scene when they arrived. That it was not going to be a case that certainly had made waves in Chicago, for example, where Shotspotter was contributing to over-policing along the way. And, you know, as best I can determine, in fact, in that way and in other ways, the implementation of Shotspotter, the Shotspotter pilot in Durham, has been a model for the nation, all the more valuable than to understand what it accomplished. The Shotspotter alerts are designed to detect outdoor gunshots, and they come with a time, a more or less precise location based on the triangulation on the part of the 3 acoustic sensors, sometimes with a number of shots fired, and they are then, the alert is sent directly to the CAD system, and typically very quickly. We found almost always in less than 60 seconds from the time that the sound was detected. And so what we're getting from this then is the increase in coverage because the Shotspotter is picking up shots that were not otherwise known as a result of 911 calls, and it's typically picking them up faster. Okay, so let me talk about that in some more detail. In the pilot area, in the 3 square mile area, there were a total of 1,447 total notifications during the pilot year, 2023, and 57% of those were from Shotspotter only. That is, there was a Shotspotter alert, but there was no 911 call. If you do the math, it's clear that what that means is that in the pilot area, the total number of gunshot notifications more than doubled as a result of the Shotspotter installation. The second bar in this graph shows you what happened to the 282 cases, about 20% of that total, that were actually confirmed by the responding officers as gunshots. So for both 911 calls and for Shotspotter alerts, more often than not, when the officers arrive, there's no evidence that there was a gun fired. And so when there is evidence of that sort, either witnesses or shell casings, then there's a crime report written, and that becomes a confirmed case. As I say, about 20% of all of the cases during this were confirmed. That confirmation level tends to be twice as high for 911 calls as it is for the Shotspotter calls along the way. The highest confirmation rate is for when there's both, which, as you see, is 15% of the total. If we just focus on the most serious gun violence incidents, cases where their victims were wounded or killed, there were 52 such incidents with one or more victims during 2023 in the pilot area. Half of them had Shotspotter alerts, including 2 where there was no 911 call. And 50 of them had 911 calls, all but those 2. It certainly is a matter of concern that of those 26 cases that Shotspotter did not alert, 8 of them were missed due to human or system failure. So that is just to say that Shotspotter is not perfect, that it does make mistakes, I'm sure, of both kinds, both false positives and false negatives. But this is an indication that there were 8 false negatives. The rest of the cases that Shotspotter missed were because of the design of Shotspotter. It does not detect gunshots that are fired indoors and very small caliber and some other cases. Here's the statistics we were able to put together on response times. Certainly, that is one of the important promises that Shotspotter makes, that it will reduce response time to the scene. And what we were looking at is trying to be true to this idea that it was a pilot project, a sort of experiment, and so that we could compare what happened in the pilot area with what happened in the rest of the city as kind of a control group in this experiment. And of course also look before and after the installation of Shotspotter. So that's what this bar chart is showing you, a comparison of 2022, the yellow bars, and 2023, the blue bars, and a comparison of the control group with the treatment group. The median response time, that is sort of a typical response time, declined in the pilot area from 7.7 minutes to 5.5 minutes. It also declined in the rest of the city during this period. And these are in response to 911 calls. But the decline was larger in the pilot area, presumably because a lot of those 911 calls were now accompanied by Shotspotter alerts, which came first and gave a better location indication along the way. So if we net out the 2 gains, it turns out that what can be attributed to Shotspotter by our calculation is a 1.2 minute gain. So without Shotspotter, instead of 5.5 minutes as the median, we would have had 6.7 minutes. And that's an important contribution. That's the median. Now, we can also look at the cases that had more extended or long response times. I chose to look at the 90th percentile, so that all but the top 10% in terms of response times. And there you see a larger gain as in the pilot area relative to the rest of the city. If we net that out, we get a 3.6 minute gain at the high end along the way. So again, Shotspotter promises to improve response times, and sure enough, it happened. So the next thing we looked at was how productive that gain was, both the gain in response time and also the gain in coverage of gunshot incidents that we saw in the pilot area. So if we think of that as somewhat distinct contributions that Shotspotter is making, on the one hand, it is the contribution of giving coverage to a lot of incidents that otherwise would not be known to the police because there was no 911 call. And then for the ones where there is a 911 call and improved response time, what does that accomplish in terms of kind of typical concerns that we would have about police investigation and police response? One of the principal outcomes is, was there an arrest or not? And we looked at that. We also looked at whether evidence at the scene was collected or not, or witnesses interviewed. And we say the total productivity gain due to Shotspotter is the sum of what is gained from broader coverage and what is gained from quicker response time when there is a 911 call. So I hope that makes sense. It took us a while to get here in thinking about it. So let me first talk about the cases that represent broader coverage. There was no 911 call. Remember, that's over half the calls that are coming in the pilot area, including, by our calculation, 73 that ended up being confirmed cases. And of those Shotspotter-only calls, there were 7 arrests. And there were 71 cases where the responding officers were able to pick up shell casings or otherwise pick up gun-related evidence along the way. So that's a clear gain in terms of the Durham Police Department's effort against gun violence. If we look more closely at those 7 arrests, all of them were on scene. All of them were on scene. 6 of the 7 were directly tied to the shooting itself in one way or another. And I'm glad to talk about that in more detail. But so that looks like one thing we can count on that Shotspotter did accomplish. If we then go on and say, well, what about the other gain that I talked about, that is the gain due to quicker response times. There, when Adam Solomon and I did the analysis, we used a kind of an experimental method or a quasi-experimental method and some somewhat fancier statistics. And our conclusion, very surprisingly from that, is that we could not detect any gain due to quicker response time for cases that had 911 calls. And that is true with respect to arrests, with respect to evidence collection, and with respect to interviewing witnesses. So for those 3 outcomes, we were seeing a gain because of broader coverage, but no gain as a result of the improved response time to cases where there was a 911 call. We don't have a particular explanation for that, that we're just reporting what we were seeing in the statistics. There was another outcome which we see as profoundly important and in terms of thinking about Shotspotter, and that is the possibility of saving lives due to quick response or to a response that would not have otherwise happened. So remember, there were 52 incidents in which somebody was shot, or one or more people were shot. In one of those, I think that there is a case that the quick response due to Shotspotter, it actually had a 911 call somewhat later, but that the quick response of the officers who arrived at the scene, found the victim who was bleeding out at the time, delivered first aid, and that difference in response time may have been the difference between life and death for that individual. Now, we're not medical doctors, and I'm not sure even a medical doctor could confirm that, but it's plausible that there was that one case where there might have been a life saved because that person, that man, was then delivered first aid, transported to the hospital, and survived. The other big question about Shotspotter, besides does it save lives, is does it reduce gun violence overall? And absolutely essential in terms of thinking of the value of that. And unfortunately, we can't give a direct answer to that question based on the data. And as I'm sure you know, if you look at the data on shootings in Durham, for example, there's enormous variability from month to month, quarter to quarter. And for us to be able to isolate the effect of Shotspotter, which at best might be 5 or 10% reduction from all of that noise, if you will, was not statistically possible. So we're agnostic on that question. We don't have a direct answer to it. On the other hand, we will say that the investigations have been somewhat more productive, and there have been more arrests, which ultimately might have an effect on the shooting rate. Okay, so the other thing Adam and I are both economists. We think about costs as well as benefits. So the costs in this case include the budgetary costs and the opportunity costs. The budgetary costs, as I'm sure you know, were for this pilot about $225,000 total. And the opportunity costs are that because of Shotspotter, as I say, more than double the number of gunshot notifications in that area, that just the Shotspotter only cases ended up being 2.3 on average per day. That would not have happened otherwise, where there was a priority to deployment on the part of the officers. If we look at that in the context of priority to deployments citywide, of which there are more than 40,000 in 2023, it works out to about 2%. So there was a 2% increase in the number of priority to deployments. Small percentage-wise, but those are resources that could have been used to respond to other calls for service, or they could have been used for routine patrol. So it does have some cost. So summing up, on the cost side, we had the budgetary costs, we have the opportunity costs, the 2% increase in priority 2 notifications. In other cities, there have been scandals, there have been legal challenges, and other kinds of problems associated with Shotspotter. And as far as I know, there haven't been any of those in Durham. That, as I say, it was a well-managed pilot project, and so that other problematic outcomes have not been part of the story. On the benefit side, increase in the number of arrests of 7, a small number seemingly, but it is a 32% increase. There was increased cases with evidence collection, almost doubled in that case. And there was a possibility that there was a life saved, and then, as I said, an unknown impact on the overall rate of gun violence. So on the one hand, you have significant costs, something that must be judged relative to a somewhat more effective effort against gun violence on the part of the police. I'm not going to give you a bottom line, and on that, I see that that's up to the council to decide about the relative values on those two sides. So my job is only to inform, not to advise in that respect. Let me say we also did another evaluation through the Wilson Center, led by Pilar Kelly, an undergraduate at Duke who is here along the way. And there's also another representative. She was working through the Wilson Center as well as with me, and ended up being an interesting pilot study, or not a pilot study, a focus group study that recruited 30 residents of the pilot area and had conversations with them in small groups about what they thought about the Shotspotter installation. Most of them had no direct information on it at all, but most of them had opinions about it. And the opinions were based on preconceptions they had about how the money should be spent, or about the players that are involved, their trust in the police or in the city council or in a private firm such as Sound Thinking and so forth. So perhaps you will have questions on that we could develop answers to from Pilar and also Lindsay. So thank you. I'm glad to answer any questions about it. And I appreciate the opportunity to work with Jason Sheese and with the chief on this project.
Thank you so much. Thank you for this information. And Pilar, are you in the room? You want to come on over? Just over with Professor. Thank you also for your work. Colleagues, before I bring you before the council, there was so basically item 17 on the agenda and item 24 are the same thing, where it's about Shotspotter. So I want to go ahead and address the folks who signed up for it before I bring it back before council. So first I have online Abdul Nasser. Abdul, can you hear me? Abdul, can you hear me? Abdul, can you hear me? Reverb. Reverb. All right, his microphone is on. His microphone is, he's unmuted. Are you able to pull him up? He's muted again. Abdul, you can unmute yourself. Okay. Madam Clerk, you can keep working with him and see if he can come on. I'll go to the next speaker.
Mr. Mayor, he just departed the queue.
Okay. Next, I have Jonte Dunstan in person. So, he left, okay. So he's going to come over here to that podium. There you go. Welcome. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mayor Williams. Good afternoon, City Council. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and the service members of our community. I'm here to speak directly to the funding of Shotspotter, that we need Shotspotter reinstated back in our community. Now, I'm going to try to hold my composure, and I'm going to have to disagree with Duke's findings, because the difference is somebody being out there 24/7, someone who's getting the reports, someone who's witnessing from eye to eye, who sees the response time of our police department responding out there. Now, in the communities that Shotspotter is set up in, these are communities where no one calls 911. If you hear the shot, everybody goes on with their business. Okay, it's just a sound. But then when that shot goes out, we don't know if somebody's shot. We don't know until like a couple of minutes later that somebody's wounded. Now, within the past 24 hours, we've then had about 3 drive-by shootings within these areas that are on this data, on this survey. This is causing property damage to the residents. This is causing mental anguish on a lot of the children that are out there. Now, within the 24 hours, 15-year-old just got shot. And like I said again, from a couple of years back, it was a big difference between you hearing regular shots, but now we're hearing automatic gunfire. But it took y'all till 1 o'clock in the morning to come up with a resolution on something that does not really pertain to us in our community right now. But it only took y'all less than 5 minutes to say no. The system is working. The studies that these people are doing, it's hard for me to sit here and look at the police chief's numbers and see where, yes, these numbers are greatly proving what our police department is doing. But I'm out there witnessing, I'm angry right now. And it's hard to sit there, and the community is so confused that we're angry at the council, because every time we want something that we feel that we come into an agreement, and that one time that the community says, yes, we want something, yes, it's working, but then all of a sudden it just looks like it's another defund the police, defund our public safety. I can witness and say, and I proved myself to Durham Police Department. One of their officers out there was struggling with a citizen out there one day. And I watched him for 10 minutes struggle while his backup was trying to get there because they was on another call. And I'm gonna go real quick, Brother Leo.
Thank you, Mr. Dunston.
No.
I gotta cut it. I'm so sorry.
And I just want to say this real quick, okay? That officer was struggling, and now if that officer would have been
Mr. Dunston.
nobody would have seen.
Mr. Dunston.
Shotspotter would have located that
Mr.
officer.
Dunston. Thank you.
A lot of people told me I shouldn't have been in here talking about this. I should have been at work.
Colleagues, I'm going to bring it back. I know. I know. Thank you. Madam Clerk, if you could see if Abdul is available again online.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me better now?
Okay, I can hear you now. Just make sure you're speaking into the mic of your device. You have 3 minutes. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, elected members of the Durham City Council. My name is Abdul Nasser Rad. I serve as the Managing Director for Research and Data at Campaign Zero. We commend the Council's recent decisions in the past months to not renew the Shotspotter contract. It reflects your shared commitment to prioritizing solutions that genuinely focus on prevention and enhance community safety. The recent findings of the evaluation, we would like to thank Dr. Cook and the rest of the staff at the Wilson Center and Duke University who's conducted this pilot evaluation. The findings align with the consensus in the field and the research that the recent Chicago mayor used to that cited to end the Shotspotter contract in Chicago. And this was not because the mayor is not interested in fighting gun violence or because he does not believe It's a serious issue. It's the realization that many of other cities and electeds have finally come to, and that's that Shotspotter does not help fight gun violence. And as the authors of the most robust and largest evaluation funded by the National Institute of Justice recently published, quote, agencies that prioritize gun violence reduction rather than reducing calls for shots fired or increasing ballistic evidence collection should consider if resources are better used for solutions other than gunshot detection technologies. Again, we'll be here. We're happy to respond to any questions. We've been doing this work around trying to educate the concerns and issues around gun violence and the concerns with Shotspotter generally. So I'll leave it here before I end up going over time. Thank you, respected members of the council, Mr. Mayor, the chief, and the staff at Duke University.
Thank you so much. All right, colleagues, bring it back to the council for comments, questions. Councilmember Baker.
Sure. Obviously, there's a lot to digest here, and we just received the report, so there's a lot that we need to look into before we deliberate and cast votes at our next council meeting. I did have one question related to the report. You showed the cost number of the contract amount. And I'm wondering if you looked at any of the considered other costs associated, for example, sending personnel out to every single gunshot. Was that factored as a cost, or were we just considering the cost of the contract as the total cost of Shotspotter?
So in
that makes
summing
sense.
Up, there's two kinds of costs.
Yeah.
The budgetary costs, which is the contract amount, and then the opportunity costs, which is the personnel costs that you're talking about.
Okay, that's where you're factoring in the personnel going out.
That the extra deployments, each one of them involving 2 patrol cars a day. Typically, they would go to the scene and spend maybe about 10 minutes there, though sometimes a lot longer. As best we could tell, that was the main concern along the lines that you're pointing to.
Appreciate that. Yeah, thank you. That's something I needed to dig into in the report. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Councilmember Caballero.
Mr. Mayor, I don't have anything right now.
Right. Councilmember Freeman. Rist.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Dr. Cook, thanks for coming. Full disclosure, Dr. Cook was one of my professors way back when I first went to graduate school at Duke University in the Sanford School. So thank you. If I can take a moment of privilege, just to thank you so much for your long, long career, 50 years at Duke University, and for being one of the legends of the Sanford School. So appreciate your work over all those years and for doing this work for the city of Durham for free, as I understand. My question, is a lot of data that we're looking to unpack here. My question is on this quicker response time to 911 calls with Shotspotter. Can you again explain this process by which, when you analyzed all the 911 calls, found that there was no improvement during the pilot year with regard to arrests, evidence collection, and interviewing witnesses? Help me understand that again.
Right, and the slides are not showing the work on that one because the work is a bit complicated along the way. But we were basically doing something that is similar to what those bar charts are also doing. We're comparing changes in the pilot area with changes in the rest of the city as kind of a control group. We tried to refine it in different ways, like we controlled for the case mix, because we know that if the call ends up being for a fatal or even non-fatal of shooting, then it's going to receive a lot more attention, and that will change the likelihood of an arrest or some of the other outcomes we looked at. So we tried to adjust for the case mix as part of our regression analysis. And within that context, when we estimated the kind of experimental effect, the change in 2023 in the pilot area compared with the rest of the city and compared with previous years, adjusting for case mix. What we were finding was statistically null result. The best, we couldn't reject the conclusion that there was no effect. Our best guess, or the best estimate from those results were actually that it was slightly negative. But it could easily have been either positive or negative from what we looked at. So, you know, under the circumstances, we can certainly rule out the possibility that there had been a major increase in productivity. Statistically, that just would not be possible from what we looked at. The productivity gain appeared to come from the broadened coverage that the Shotspotter was giving along the way. Now, I report this conclusion, and I'm enough of a criminologist to be wondering what exactly is going on here, because, of course, it has long been accepted wisdom that response time is important in crimes like this, and improving response times should increase the productivity of responses. And so for that, I can only express my puzzlement about the finding, but that's what the finding was.
Thank you so much.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Dr. Cook, thank you. It's an honor to have you here. This was, as you know, much anticipated and much awaited for report. So I'm grateful for you being here today. I'm grateful for your data and your information, which confirms some things that we already knew and had seen, and probably for some other folk, just solidified some of their thinking. I wanted to, again, thank you and the team, the entire team, and I know there are folk here from Sound Thinking as well. I want to thank you, Chief, as well, again, for your early report and for your work on this. I want to highlight something you said about Durham being touted as a model for the use and deployment of this technology. And I want to thank every person who was against this technology and who spoke up. I want to thank, I'm serious, every person who raised the alarm about the possibility of over-policing, about the efficacy of the technology, about what the posture of our officers would be when they responded, because I think through their efforts, you actually may be saving lives in other cities around the country who are looking at what Durham's doing. I think you made this a better pilot because of the guardrails, because of the excellent checks that we put in around this technology. I do want to speak something that I find interesting, Dr. Cook, in the question as whether or not the technology reduces gun violence, because I don't know that Sound Thinking has that in any of their literature, and we who were supporting the use of the technology never suggested that it was going to reduce gun violence. That was never a claim. There was a claim that it would be a tool useful in our response and that it could possibly save lives, and the company said it would reduce response time. So I just want to be very clear. And there's an interesting corollary. We have spent millions of dollars on a public safety department, an alternative response, non-armed responders. One of the things that was said about that is what causes deaths at the hands of police when we have folk that are in mental distress is that police are not equipped or properly trained to deal with folk who are going through mental distress. And by virtue of police contact, that's what raises the number of fatalities. So the suggestion was that if you limit those number of contacts, then you're going to keep more people alive. We haven't done any studies as to how many folk lives have been saved based upon our HEART program. We've done no data suggesting that because the HEART went to this particular incident, this incident most likely would have ended in death as police went, and we poured millions of dollars into it. and I support it because it's a good idea, because it's a tool that broadens our response capabilities as a government. But we cannot say that the millions of dollars that we've put into our HEART program, we can't point to one life that's been saved. We just believe that that's the outcome because we believe as an article of faith that less police contact will lead to better outcomes. In this particular case, with Shotspotter, which has really, we use the term pilot with the HEART program, but it wasn't a pilot. It was a done deal from when we announced it. This was actually a pilot. And we actually have data. We actually have data points where someone's life was potentially saved by early intervention. We have data about response times, and we have no data about how many lives were saved with the HEART program. And I dare somebody to try and talk me out of my support for that initiative, because it's a good idea. It's a tool we need to have in our toolbox. So I just want to frame that as we digest, colleagues, as we digest this data, no one, and I want to make sure that this pilot isn't unfairly burdened with questions or proving claims that were never made about it. Not by sound thinking and not by anyone. We never claimed that it was going to reduce gun violence. What we did say is what happened, is that we could potentially save lives and that response time would be improved, and that it would be a tool in our hands. I thank you for the data. I look forward to further engagement. I want to thank the members of the community who spoke today in person, and for the emails and community response that we've gotten via other means as well. And I look forward to, I will say finally that there's a lot of attention placed upon Chicago. I want to call some other cities: Goldsboro, North Carolina; Winston-Salem, North Carolina; Wilmington, North Carolina; Rocky Mount, North Carolina; New York City, New York; San Francisco, California; Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, who's actually expanding their coverage area. I just hope that we're not cherry-picking one city because of confirmation bias. And there's even a question as to what really happened as to His Honor's decision in Chicago as to why the contract wasn't renewed, but I won't get into that now. But if we're going to talk about other cities, then let's talk about other cities, plural, rather than cherry-picking one that may align with an outcome we've already determined. Thank you, Professor Summit. It's an honor to have you here. I want to associate myself with Council Members Riss' comments about your distinguished service. Thank you, Chief. Thanks to everyone here. Thank you, colleagues, also, for this great discussion. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I yield back.
Thank you. Yeah, go ahead.
I really appreciate the work of Professor Emeritus Cook, and I really wanted to know if the police chief will be at our council meeting on Monday night. You will? Okay, that was all.
Councilmember Caballero.
Thank you. I just wanted to thank everyone for the presentation today, and I look forward to kind of digging into the report. We didn't get it until right before the work session. So I just want to commend both our police department and the Wilson Center for their work and all of the just careful detail. I think it was very useful.
All right, thank you. And I'll just give a few brief remarks. I want to make sure, so this, Mayor Pro Tem actually kind of mentioned this confirmation bias. Concrete bias is what I usually call it. I want to make sure I'm not approaching it with that. And, you know, I always tell people I was not the biggest cheerleader for this technology at first, simply because I was listening to what was being told to me. But I did do quite a bit of homework and, you know, taking an objective approach to it. I'm glad I did that. I want to speak directly to folks that I've personally spoken with that are against it, against just the incorporation of of the sound thinking or Shotspotter technology. And one thing I hear a lot of is Chicago and the AP report. So I did a little digging, and Brandon is a really good friend of mine. Brandon Johnson is the mayor of Chicago, and he just held a press conference They gave it an extension to pan it out, and they have reasons for panning it out in their contract. But I think the best way to look at it is that's Chicago and this is Durham. And their police chief is their police chief and ours is ours. And what he said to me, he said, brother, he said, for that, whatever you all do, don't use Chicago as an example because we have our own issues and it goes way back, multiple mayors ago. They have a lot of issues in that city that we don't have in Durham. And so I just want to be really careful about saying Durham shouldn't because Chicago X, Y, Z. That's just not a fair comparison. And, you know, in other cities, you know, especially you know, Mayor Pro Tem named some of these cities, a lot of rural North Carolina cities don't have our issues either, and they also don't have the same pushback. I just really want to focus on Durham and allowing the data here to help us make this decision. The other thing is I want to make sure we're asking the right question. And this really goes into, you know, the scope of this research. People are saying we shouldn't spend money on this because it's you know, it doesn't reduce gun violence. I have yet to see where it's supposed to reduce gun violence. I don't know if that's the right question to ask. You know, is it being a resource to help us be more efficient as a department? Are we trending that way? And if so, then yes. People say we should use the money for an after-school program. For someone who used to design after-school programs, as a former principal or associate superintendent or school administrator, it costs a heck of a lot more than $200,000 to run an after-school program. We're talking over $1 million if you're going to do it right. So that's not really an even comparison either. I just want to make sure that there's fidelity to this conversation, and I don't want to sensationalize it. And I live like 2 blocks away, not far from, actually I probably live in one of the safest parts of the city. So unfortunately, my personal lived experience does not inform me on how I should or should not, you know, determine on this. So all I have to rely on is the actual data. And part of that data is concrete, and part of it is anecdotal. The anecdotal is when I go into, when I was actually on the campaign trail and I had to go and pay one of my campaign workers, and he said, it's okay. It was 11 o'clock at night. He said, I really need the money. He said, it's okay, you can come over here. There's a Shotspotter sensor right over my house. And I said, well, it's not listening to you, it's not watching you, but the fact that he felt safe, that he can invite me over at 11 o'clock at night. That's anecdotal. Concrete, the data is speaking for itself. So I just want to make sure that we're having a fair assessment of this. We did just get this report, and I want to make sure that I, as well as my colleagues, if you all are okay with this, really take some time to dig into it and really be able to educate ourselves more on it. And, you know, at that point, the fate will present itself. But I really hope that we make the most objective decision here. And when we ask if it's worth it, only thing I needed to see was the data point of how many lives potentially was saved when no one called 911. One is worth it for me. One. So this is a resource that will help us be more efficient, you know, and I think the data speaks for itself. It's not a resource that's going to completely stop gun violence. It's not a resource that's going to, you know, some of the things we've heard. And lastly, there are some people that come and say to me, well, it's going to over-police the Black and brown community. Hello, the Black and brown community that I've talked to are asking for more police, but we're short. So I just want to be very frank and direct and transparent about this, about how I'm thinking about this. And I look forward to digging into the report. Thank you all for doing this. Thank you for being that independent third-party source. Chief, thank you. I'll put your compassion for this community over any chief in this entire nation, in your entire department. And Pilar, thank you as well for your work. So There are no more comments. I think we're all good on this one.
Right, thanks very much, and I'm available if anybody wants to talk, so.
Thank you. Colleagues, give me one moment. There's something we're going to have to discuss where we have to give some directions to staff. Councilmember Baker. Okay, Councilmember Baker, sorry to interrupt your conversation, but we need direction on the item that you pulled. That's number 17. So it's a unique setup here because we've had so much information on it, but this is the actual contract. So we can discuss this contract now, or it can go on GBA after we kind of dig into the contract. GBA? Okay, I just needed to know that in order to settle the agenda. And I believe that's it. So we're going to go ahead and settle the agenda, and yeah, we'll call it a day.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, and we do have a closed session. So what I'll do is allow the manager to settle the agenda, but first I'll come to Diana. There's a lot of moving parts up here.
And there's one more moving part. Mr. Abdul is back online. Did you want to hear from him, or?
No, we've already given space for that.
Okay, all right, thank you.
All right, we will, all right, good. So, Madam Manager, you will go ahead and settle the agenda. Yes.
Mr. Mayor, I have a board and committee report.
Oh, that's right, yeah, I'm sorry. Please report out.
It's very short. The Durham Affordable Housing Implementation Committee appointment for the category of resident from Durham Housing Authority Properties, the nominee is Glenda J. Ang. And for the Human Relations Commission appointment, category of other person, the nominee is Asme Kurouch. And that's the end of my report.
Thank you so much. Madam Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have for your consent agenda items 1 through 16 and items 18 through 21. For your GBA agenda, I have item number 17, and for GBA public hearings, items 25 through 27. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And at this time, I'll entertain a motion to go into closed session.
Move. Second.
Been moved and properly seconded?
Mr. Mayor.
We need to actually have the motion read, right?
Correct, yes, thank you. We didn't do that at the beginning of the meeting.
Retrieve that motion. All right.
Thank you. And this is a little different from what you all are used to, because the closed session is actually under a different category than it is when I call a closed session with you all. So this one is to hold a closed session to seek instruction in negotiating the material terms of a proposed contract for the acquisition, purchase, option, exchange, or lease of real property pursuant to North Carolina General Statute 143, 318.11A5.
So moved.
All right, it's been moved
Second.
and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, thank you. We are now in closed session. Well, we are now going to closed session.
Correct, up in the committee room.
The committee room upstairs.